Hello everyone and welcome to Kinetics TV. Today I'm going to show you how to diagnose and replace your fuel temperature sensor, which is also known as the P0183 fault code. Now the first indication of this fault will be the engine management light on your dashboard. This could be for various different reasons, so the best way to find out what it is specifically is to use a fault code reader like I have installed in this car here, which plugs into the OBD port. It will then tell you the specific code for where the fault in the engine is. Now as you can see, there are two fault codes already stored on this vehicle. We are going to ignore these fault codes for this video because they're not relevant to this and are only on due to the EGR having been removed previously. We're not going to focus on this, but instead on the fault code at the end, the P0183. A simple Google search of this fault code tells us it's the fuel temperature sensor. Now the voltage will either be outside the limits or it won't be giving any voltage at all. Either way, it's not working. Now this is important because the voltage coming from this sensor is what defines the values that it's reading. So with the voltage being outside the limits, the ECU can see this and it can see that it's no longer working and then puts the light on the dashboard, as you can see. Now the next step and the most crucial step is obviously replacing the part. Now to ensure you get the right part, it's important that you identify your vehicle as well as the engine it uses and any codes within that. For example, this is a Seat Ibiza. It's a 19TDI engine and I know that that engine is the AXR code. Now I know what the car model is, what engine it uses. I can then check and confirm the part number for the sensor also matches the sensor I'll be replacing it with. This way it's going to be 100% match and it will 100% work. You don't want to waste your money or be doing trial and error. The important next part is also to make sure you order not just the cheapest sensor, make sure it's a branded, reputable part. Buy cheap, you buy twice, and there's eBay's flooded with loads of generic parts, unbranded. It might work for a day or two, but is it going to work as long as the OEM replacement did? Probably not. Now I'm replacing it with a Lucas part, which is not exactly OEM. However, this is a branded part. It's not a cheap, unknown manufacturer. It will do the job for now, and it will function. As you can see, the sensor includes everything that we'll need, which includes the sensor itself, the replacement O-ring, and also the metal circlip. So now it's time for the replacement. Now this setup will vary depending on the engine and manufacturer. However, in general, the fuel temperature sensor will normally be located not too far away from the engine and attached to one of the fuel lines nearby, as you can see in this case here. So the first step is to remove any electrical connectors or plugs connecting to the sensor. Now I did make a mistake when I filmed this. What I did was remove the circlip first, which actually made it harder for me to remove the electrical connector after, because the circlip is what's holding the sensor in. So it's much easier to remove the electrical connector first and then remove the circlip. So to remove the electrical connector, there is a plastic tab which needs to be pushed down in order for it to be released. Now this tab is very small and fiddly to get to, so it's much easier to use a screwdriver. Just be gentle with it because it's on the plastic, and push down on the tab and give the sensor a wiggle while you're pushing down on the tab. You'll feel the connector coming off from the sensor, and once it started moving, it's off. Now the next stage is to remove the circlip. As I said before, I did it the wrong way around in the video, so once the connector's off, then you remove the circlip, but I removed the circlip first, which is why the connector's still on in the clip. But if you're following correctly, you remove the connector, then you remove the circlip in this step, which I'm going to show you. Now the circlip is a horseshoe shaped clip which simply works by slotting on and holding it in place. So the way to remove it is by using the screwdriver, pushing up on one of the sides, and once one of the sides is unclipped, the other side should come off pretty easily, and then the circlip is removed as easy as that. Now to remove the sensor, it's as simple as holding onto the sensor housing and then pulling on the sensor, but also giving it a wiggle motion, which will help to release it, as it's been there for a long time obviously. It might not seem like it's doing much at first, however, it will start to get more loose and eventually it will pop out. Now just be careful, be aware that there may still be some diesel, and it probably will be a little bit that comes out. As you can see in mine, it wasn't much at all. However, it depends on the car and location. Looking closely at the old sensor, we can see that it's stamped 08 Now this car is a 2008, so I know that this is the original sensor, and considering it's been working for 15 years, it's done a good job. Already knowing that our sensor includes everything that we need, the first step is to place the O-ring into the right position. In this case, the O-ring goes into the sensor housing. When installing or replacing any O-ring, it's important to make sure that the O-ring is seated correctly and it's flat all round. In this instance, you can only access it from one side, which is why it's a good idea to run your finger on the outside edge to make sure you don't feel any inconsistencies, just to make sure that's all smooth and flat and level and it's installed correctly. When installing the new sensor, if you're unsure about the orientation or anything, that's why it's a good idea to take a picture before you start any work so you know what it needs to look like after. If not, then you can use a point of reference. For example, I use the electrical plug as it can only fit in one way. Therefore, I know which way the sensor has to fit. As you can see, to install the sensor, you simply do the opposite. You just push forward, give it a smooth wiggle just to ensure that it doesn't pinch on one of the edges of the O-ring, and then it should just pop in a forward motion. The next step is to install the circlip. Now, as you can see, the circlip doesn't necessarily have to be replaced if it's not damaged, but if it comes with a new one and it fits, then why not? The most important part here to obviously replace is the sensor, but also the O-ring. Do not use the old O-ring. Installing the circlip is fairly simple. You just need to get one side hooked on and then get your hand in a position where you can apply some force and push the other side over. Once it's installed correctly and in the right position, you'll see that both the ends of the circlip are sticking out the same amounts from the outside, and you'll also see that the sensor is held firmly in place. Now the final stage of this installation is to plug in the electrical connector. It can only fit one way, so it's pretty straightforward. Now the thing to consider is when you remove the plug, there was a tab which had to be pushed to remove it. Now this tab is going to be the indication to know that the connector is correctly installed. What I mean by this is, when you are pushing the connector on, you will push and then you will hear a click, which will be the tab locking back into place. And once you hear this click, you know that the connector is installed properly. Now the final stage is to make sure that everything has worked. So the first thing you want to do is get back in your car, start the vehicle and check on the fault code reader. Now looking at the fault code reader, I did not clear the fault codes previously, which is why they're still stored on there. As you can see, the EGL ones which I'd mentioned earlier on in the video are still the P0183. So what we are going to do now is erase those codes, and the test is by restarting the engine to see if the P0183 is still remaining. Right then, so we've cleared the codes, switched off the engine. It's now time to restart and see if the code is still remaining. So we're going to go over to the code reader now. We're going to look at the code that's stored. And as you can see now, there's no longer 3 codes remaining, 2 of which were the EGR and 1 was for the P0183. As you can see now, there are only 2 codes, being the EGR codes. The P0183 is now gone, which means that the fault no longer exists and it has been fixed. The ECU recognizes this, so we know that the job is now done. So this is how you diagnose and replace a fuel temperature sensor for your car. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.